Very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Central and South Planning Committee. I'm Ian Edwards, Councillor Ian Edwards, and I am Chairman of this committee. We are attempting to do video stream this meeting. We ordinarily do, but we seem to be having a little bit of technology problems. But we're going to try and sort it out. But I do need to advise you, if we get it sorted and you are speaking, you will be seen on camera and your presentation will be heard. The cameras, though, are pointing this way, so if you're sitting in a public gallery, you will not be on screen. And just remind everybody that only when the microphone is live will your comments be heard. Okay, details of the business are published in the agenda papers, which are available for you as you came in. I will explain a little bit of the meeting as we go on. Fire alarms. Let's get into the ordinary introduction. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if the alarm does sound, we will be evacuating the building. We will all be leaving at the same time, so we will assist you on the way out. However, the fire exits are the way you came back in, and there's also one behind us, should for any reason that be blocked or not accessible. Our assembly point is the forecourt of the Civic Centre, and that's where we meet up. Okay. And telephones, if I could ask everybody please to have their mobile devices switched off or to silent, and I must do the same. I must remember my iPad because that has a habit of ringing in meetings when I don't expect to. I think it should be off. Whilst I'm doing that, feedback forms. Ladies and gentlemen, feedback forms were provided and are on your desks. I do encourage you to provide your feedback at the meeting. It goes to our democratic services and it does help us improve our meetings. So please be honest and open in your comments. It doesn't come direct to myself or any other member of the committee, but we do try and act on your comments to improve the accessibility and transparency of the meetings. Okay. Declarations of it. Hold on. Let me just. Right, for now. One second. Poor management. Poor management. Before we get into the agenda properly, I'd like to just introduce people around the table. There's a lot of us, and you may be wondering what we all do. Now, the councillors are the voting members. The chairman only votes on the issues of planning if there be a tie, and that is a very unusual event. Now, if I may introduce to you the councillors that will be the decision makers. On my far left-hand side, we have Councillors Carter, Councillor East and Councillor Morse. On my far right-hand side, Councillor Stead, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Ahmed Walana, Councillor Chamdal, Councillor Yarrow. We're assisted by a team of officers. We have Royson Hogan and Joyta Mehta, who are out from legal services. I have this evening two members of Democratic Services, Kate Porter and Luke Taylor. On my right-hand side, I have Alex Krushak, who's our Planning Services Manager and gives me advice. Meg Harani is presenting each of the applications, and you will hear about them, and Syed Shah provides us with the technical transportation advice. Let me kick straight through the agenda and I'll explain as we go along. Apologies for absence, please.
We've got apologies from Councillor Dillon and Councillor Duncan, and substitutes are Councillor East and Councillor Morse.
Thank you very much. You're most welcome. Declarations of interest in matters coming before this meeting. I must declare an interest in each of the enforcement issues and will be stepping out of the room having reported those particular matters. Okay. Sign and receive the minutes of the previous meetings, and we have minutes here, please, of the 20th of July.
Great.
Thank you very much, and of the 9th of August.
Great.
Thank you. Right, item 4, matters that have been notified in advance or urgent. This is just a technicality. I have been advised of one urgent matter which I have accepted, and that is an enforcement matter, and the reason I've accepted it as an urgent matter is to limit the detriment caused to residents by taking prompt enforcement action. Agenda item 5, businesses in part 1 and part 2. Let me explain. Part 1 are all of the planning applications. They are discussed in open forum. They're recorded on YouTube should you wish to review the decisions of the meeting this evening. Part 2 of the meeting is held in closed session when we're discussing matters of enforcement, and we hold that in closed session because we're talking about matters of evidence and we are talking about people who may ultimately be prosecuted. It's not in the public interest that be disclosed at this moment in time. Therefore, that is all done in private. However, the matter and the decisions are published, as you would see from the agendas of past meetings. We will break if we get... Oh, we are live. So, good evening, anybody who is joining us online, and my apologies for the delay. We had a slight technical issue. When we move into part 2, will be a short break whilst we ask members of the public to leave the room, and also whilst we break the CCTV link. Okay, are we ready to go? I covered everything. Thank you. Let us move then promptly into the business proper, and we turn to number 6, please, Manor Court, High Street, Harmondsworth. Tarani.
Thank you, Chairman. This application relates to Manor Lodge, which forms a part of the wider Manor Court complex in Harmondsworth. Manor Lodge is Grade 2 listed, and part of the site is within the Greenbelt. The proposal is for the change of use of the property to an HMO, house in multiple occupation, to provide 10 bed sits for a temporary period of 3 years. The application is the subject of 5 letters and a petition, and the details of the consultation replies are set out on pages 19 to 23 of the agenda. The main issues for members to consider are the principles of the use, the quality of accommodation provided, and the impact on adjoining residents. In terms of the principle of the use, the building was last in use as offices, and although works were undertaken to convert it to a care home, it was never brought into use following the grant of planning permission in 2008. With regard to the loss of the office use, the principle of this has already been established with the grant of permission for its conversion to a care home. There has not been a significant change in policy since that time or that consent, which would mean that this is no longer acceptable. With regard to the loss of a care home use, there are no policy protection for such use, and current policies seek to encourage a wide mix of residential uses. Accordingly, the loss of existing uses is considered acceptable. Residents have suggested that given the heritage importance of the site, the use of the building as an HMO is not appropriate. Current policies seek to preserve and protect heritage assets. However, they are not prescriptive over the types of use appropriate for such designations. Policy B12 of the local plan confirms that whilst listed buildings should preferably remain in their historic use, an alternative use will be permitted if it is appropriate to secure the renovation and subsequent preservation of the building. Whilst an alternative residential use might better serve to ensure the long-term preservation of the building, permission is currently sought on a temporary basis, and the ongoing use of the site would better guarantee the upkeep and maintenance of the building than leaving it vacant. No alterations are proposed to the building, and minor alterations are proposed to the external landscape area. Thus, the development is considered to comply with relevant policy such that no objections are raised in principle to the development. Council supplementary planning guidance on houses in multiple occupation sets out recommended guidelines relating to the internal layout of such developments. The room sizes within Manor Lodge range from 17.4 metres squared to 22 metres squared. The majority of rooms could accommodate up to 3 persons, with 2 of the rooms large enough to accommodate up to 4 persons. Although the council's landlord engagement team have advised that occupancy ranges between 2 and 4 persons per room. The SPG goes on to recommend that houses in multiple occupations should contain at least 1 ground floor habitable room over 10 square metres other than a kitchen. 2 communal living rooms well above the required size will be provided at ground floor level. The SPG states that regardless of the number and size of habitable rooms, the occupancy should normally be limited to either 10 persons or the number of occupants if the property were converted into self-contained flats, whichever is the greater. The property could accommodate well in excess of this. However, given the size of the site and the building and the level of facilities provided, The officers consider that a refusal on this ground alone could not be justified. The SPG also recommends that a minimum of 15 square metres of private usable amenity space is provided per habitable room. Thus a total of 195 square metres of amenity space would be required. With a usable garden area well in excess of 1,500 square metres, the development complies with this standard. Thus, it's considered that the development provides an acceptable living environment for its occupants. In terms of the impact on adjoining occupiers, no external alterations to the building are proposed, and the closest window within Manor Lodge is approximately 21 metres from the nearest part of the closest residential property in Blondale Close. Thus, the use of existing rooms as habitable accommodation complies with minimum overlooking standards that are set out in the Council's SPG. The development could lead to an intensification of the use of the garden over that which would have occurred from its use as offices or a care home. However, the size of the space is such that a landscape scheme which provides more usable mown grass and patio areas close to the building with trees and wildflower planting around the edges of the site is possible and would assist in alleviating noise and disturbance close to the site boundaries. In conclusion, the loss of existing uses is considered in compliance with policy. The proposal is considered to provide an acceptable living environment for its occupants, and the impact on adjoining occupiers is not such that a refusal could be justified. Accordingly, approval is recommended. I can just go through the plans. That shows the extent of the site and the fact that part of it is within the green belt. The brown colouring denotes listed buildings of either statutory or locally listed buildings, so there's quite a grouping of these buildings around the site, and the site itself is statutory listed. The red denotes the site and the blue is the land owned by the applicants. That's the proposed site plan. Again, you can see the nearest residential properties are located in Blondale Close here. It's a landscape plan. And then these are existing floor plans, and there's no accommodation provided in the basement, and these are the ground floor and upper floor plans. So, as I say, there's no external alterations to the building, so the elevations are as existing. And that's the extent of the site. So that's the site itself, the access, and then the surrounding, the amenity space. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Harani. Ladies and gentlemen, planning committees, although we have these meetings in public, there isn't a general public right to speak. The only people that can speak are petitioners, and the petition has been received in this matter. And if Mr. Rumsey or his nominee wish to come forward, you have 5 minutes to address the committee. Sorry? I should see this first, but let's carry on. Whether or not it's been stopped before is neither here nor there. At the end of the day, this is additional information that now needs to be considered by the committee, and I may need to take advice, both legal and planning professional advice on it. So you must now allow us time to look at this. Let me get back to the petition and your speaking rights, and then we will break whilst we read this. It's 5 minutes, okay, controlled by lighting, and you will get 4 minutes on a green light and 1 on an amber, and when your time is up, red light comes and I must draw you to a close. However, as you are going to refer to these, switch your microphone off, please. As you're going to refer to these, what we now need to do is now need to break, and I now need to read this, and I encourage all my colleagues to read it.
So I think if we have a speaker on representing the applicant,
They need to see it as well.
to see it at the same time.
Okay. I absolutely agree with you. Is the applicant and Mr. Thunder or the agent present? Have you been presented with this additional written information? You need to see this copy and be given time to read it. So if there's another copy available, please. Thank you. Okay, colleagues, we're now going to take a few minutes to have a read and digest what's being said. Thank you. Colleagues, have we all had time to read the additional information? Okay. Okay, when I call the meeting back to order, please. And Mr. Ramsey. Your 5 minutes. Once you turn on the microphone, if you, that's when your 5 minutes will start. Thank you.
Well, normally when I do one of these presentations to you, I've normally just read this through myself for you and taken any questions. So I probably won't need a full 5 minutes now. What I would like to do is first of all take the officer over there to task when we're talking about the status of the, I call it the Manor Farmhouse because that's how as a local resident I know it. The barn, the Great Barn is a grade grade 1 building, and under Historic England's regulations, any building which is seen as a listed building within the curtilage of a grade 1 building before the year of 1948, then those other buildings have to be considered as a grade 1 listed building. Now that gives far greater protection to the Manor Farmhouse and the surrounding buildings there as well. That also obviously affects any of the other buildings that are on that site that were there prior to 1948. I didn't think that was made clear to you, so it is something that you need to be aware of, because obviously as a grade 1 listed building there is more protection, which includes both the inside and the outside. I believe the main reason, or the main problem that we have with the proposal is the sheer number of HMOs that we're having in Harmersworth Village. We've had quite a large income over the last 5 or 6 years, and we're finding that the community now is basically being destroyed. We have a lot of people coming and going. If you look at some of the events that we hold in Harmersworth, that we've been doing for the last 10 years, we find there's less and less residents who see themselves as Harmersworth people still living there. It's people coming in, spend a bit of time in their HMO building, and they're gone. It's absolutely destroying the community within Harmersworth. Now I know that if we look in the wards near Brunel, you don't allow more than 5% of the buildings to be HMOs. If you look at the list that I presented to you, you'll probably find we're in excess of 10 or 12%, which is as far as and that's not including the barn, the Manor Farmhouse. So that is extremely excessive. It's really, I mean, I've lived there for 40 odd years now, and I've seen Harmersworth change in the last 5. It really is being affected by the HMO scenario. That's really all I've got to say over and above what you've actually read. I did put in the back comments about another particular building, which I know isn't concerned with the barn, but it does try to show you how we feel about HMOs in general and the number that we have there. And we don't seem to be getting to grips with this particular problem. This building that we're talking about here now, 66 Hatch Lane, you did actually say, I say you, your committee, that you would actually resolve the issues. That has never happened. The grounds have been concreted over. They were told by the leader who was running the meeting where I was here before that they would have to put it back as it was. It's never been put back, and they've just sold it with an advert saying that they are taking in over £29,000 a year as an HMO. Now, whether that's Hillingdon paying that or whether it's some other organisation, I don't know. But for sure, that is another building in the area. It should not have been an HMO at this point in time.
Thank you, Mr. Rumsey. I picked up two particular issues there that we will go into some more detail in a minute. Firstly, this is about the curtilage of the barn and the Grade 1 listing and the applicability of that in these circumstances. And you have commented on the number of HMOs, and that will also be explored. What I would say at this moment is that the issue of any other HMO within that is outside the consideration of this committee, although we might have a considerable understanding of your submission. That said, colleagues, are there any questions of clarification you wish to put to Mr. Rumsey? No. In the absence of that, sir, if I may invite you please to return to your seat. And now the agent, Ms. Jane Wakelin, if you wish to speak, you have the opportunity to come forward. And again, 5 minutes, 4 minutes with the green light, 1 on the amber, and when the red light comes on, I must draw you to a close. Timing will... Sorry? As soon as you press the button on the microphone, we will start the timer. Okay, thank you.
Okay. My name's Jane Wakelin. I come from Wakelin Architects. I'm a planner, and we were responsible for preparing this application. And I'm very glad to have the opportunity to come and speak this evening and support the recommendation, although I feel that has been covered quite...
Can I just hold you 1 second?
Yeah. It's not my Fitbit, is it?
This may sound very silly, but could I ask you to turn it on?
Is that okay? Better?
Let's try.
Okay, I don't mind speaking without it. Okay. Right, okay. So I'm happy to speak and support the recommendation, which I think was very clear concerning the issues of whether we comply with the standards, etc., as far as the Council's policy is concerned and their supplementary planning guidance. What I wanted to emphasise to the committee and actually now to the public is that this is a temporary use. This isn't a thin end of the wedge, and this isn't a we'll get temporary and then we'll keep sneaking on for permanent. This is part of a we did a pre-app consultation last year for the whole of this site, including the listed buildings, obviously not the Grade 1 listed barn, which will convert this site to residential, 15 units. It was, unfortunately, the public aren't allowed to see these pre-apps, but our intention for this property is that it will be split into 2 4-bedroom houses. Now, this is quite a complex procedure, and there's a lot of work involved. So in the meantime, this has been used as an HMO and has been used by the council, and I've been round it myself and seen that there are now 10, and there weren't 10, but there are 10 now, to comply with the policy. And I know I've been there, and I didn't anticipate seeing it because I turned up with the planning officer, so you can imagine how embarrassing that was. But there are now 10 units with the compliance, and that is echoed with in the recommendation. But the strategy for the whole of this site is that it will be residential. It'll be, as I say, 15 units. It'll improve the conservation area. It will minimise impact on the greenbelt, reduce the traffic, secure the economic retention of these buildings, and also improve the landscaping. And there is a landscaping scheme that, with this application that will actually provide additional screening to that one house on the left as you enter the site, where it's completely open, and that will be part of these proposals. When the owners purchased this property, they had assumed it was a care home. The consent that was granted was never implemented, therefore it reverted back to offices. They didn't understand that. We were able to enlighten them when we went down there. But if this consent is granted, it will not change the physical appearance of this building. We don't need listed building consent, so that's how non-invasive it is. The HMO use was affected by Altwood Housing, and they've run this for over a year already, and it's housed many Hillingdon tenants. As I say, all the rooms comply with the SPG on HMOs. Parking is provided at 7 cars. Most of these people don't have cars. I mean, I'm reporting what I have been told by Altwood. I don't know about people parking in the village. I've visited the site on many occasions. I know there have been issues with the parking, but I hope, subject to my insistence with the residents, that has now been sorted. I might hear otherwise. There is no objection to this scheme from English Heritage. We've met English Heritage on site. I've met the Conservation Advisory Panel from Harmondsworth on site, and I think they're all supportive of the residential use. Finally, I'd just like to say this is a temporary basis, and it will enable us to continue to preserve these buildings, maintain security, and work through this application. And if anyone wants to see a copy of the pre-application submission we made, I'd be very happy to show them. I mean, it was our intention that we would have an on-site consultation prior to my main purpose, which is residential use of these buildings and their long-term, securing their long-term future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, any questions, clarification? Councillor Yarrow.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just a little puzzled. Are you actually saying that it's being used for over a year now as an HMO by somebody else,
No.
and that you are now making this a legal situation?
This is a retrospective application, yes.
So it's been operating illegally for the last year?
They had, but when there was a... Yes, I'm sure. I'm not trying to deceive. I mean, the residents will back this up. I mean, when it was purchased on the basis of a care home consent that had not been implemented. And they believed it was the case. It's been occupied by council tenants, as my understanding is. Now, it was when it was drawn to attention that this was not legal. Obviously, we were brought in. We were working on the overall scheme for the site. I've never done a retrospective application in my life, but I could see that until we sorted this out, we would not have any credibility with anybody if we started to try and promote what I think could be a very successful scheme. So, yes, I can go on forever. Yes.
I think you've answered the question there. We're going to have to do a little bit of a double act because the main microphone doesn't cut yours out.
Shall I switch it off?
If you would, but you're going to have to switch it back on again in a minute because I'm sure you're going to have some further questions to answer. Councillors Morse, Councillors East and Councillors Carteret have each indicated, and we'll take them in that order, please. Councillor Morse.
You've said that Albrecht House is actually running the illegal HMO, is it? Who do you represent? Or do you represent...
I represent the owners.
Yeah, this is
Sorry,
the
can
owners.
I ask you, please, when you answer, to toggle on the microphone? I do apologise not having a master. I can't cut other people out. We have a technical problem with the master, so we need to do a little bit of synchro here and switching on and off the microphones. And it's important because people who may be watching us online can't hear us if we don't have the microphones on. So, Councillor Morse, back to you.
Sorry, so you represent the owners, and Albrecht House, is that correct, have actually then paid to use the site and then run the illegal HMO. Am I correct in saying that?
The people that are running the housing have leased the property.
Other question? On the area outlined in red, is that the total land in your ownership?
No, the total land in ownership is everything excluding the Grade Barn, the Grade 1 listed barn.
Does this include...
The blue includes the blue. So the blue is outside the application site but within the ownership.
But you own that as well?
Well,
you represent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And that...
Please, we don't want to get into too much detail there. If we can just directly answer questions that I put to you. Councillor Morse, could you...
Third question.
No, please. I'd like to share now to other colleagues, if I may. as they've indicated. Councillor East.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like you to, you said you visited this unit and found there were 13 bed sets. I'm a bit concerned that if you're saying who would then supervise that there remains 10 bed sets, because, you were caught up.
Thank you. I think you've answered that question. Councillor Cartwright.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My main concern is that in your conversation you said the majority of the people going to be living there do not have cars, so parking is not going to be an issue. But my main concern is, how do we know, and what guarantee have we got they're not going to have cars in the future, and how are we going to manage it when they do? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morse, you wish to come back in?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you own the land where the cars approach? There's a piece of land where the cars actually approach Manor Lodge to get to the car park. Do you own that?
Thank you. Asked and answered. Any other questions, clarification, colleagues? Thank you. Thank you very much. I invite you to return to your seat. Okay, colleagues, this is clearly quite a complex issue and one of great embarrassment as chair that the council have been using a premise that hasn't been properly approved, and that is embarrassing for us. However, I need to set that aside. Although residents may expect that we have free rein as a planning committee, we don't. We must act within quite clear guidance and case law, and we must consider matters that are relevant to this particular application, and many of them are. In the first instance, I would like to ask for clarification about the comment about this being within the curtilage of a Grade 1 listed premise. Is that so? And if it is so, what impact does that have on this particular application? Thank you.
So the assertion that the petitioner put forward is correct insofar as if we have a building, any ancillary buildings or connections to or outbuildings at the time it is designated would be curtilage listed. However, if subsequent to that any of those buildings are assessed on their own merits, they then take on the protection that they're afforded by virtue of their own listing. So in this scenario, the collection of buildings may well at one time be curtilage buildings to the Great Barn, which is Grade 1 listed, a Grade 1 listed building. However, this individual building has been assessed in its own merits, and it has a designation of Grade 2. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Petitioners have also commented about the number of HMOs in an area. It would be helpful if Mr. Khrushchev, you could explain our policies on HMOs, particularly in this area, whether or not this application is within that policy or without, and recognise again, I need to emphasise that as a committee, we are bound to operate within those policies, not within what we wish those policies might say. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. There are two parts to this, I suspect. One is the area that has the Article 4 direction, Brunel and South Uxbridge. And within those areas, there are restrictions as to conversions under permitted development to houses in multiple occupation. Under permitted development, you can convert or use a house as a house in multiple occupation if there are 6 residents or less without planning permission. And I suspect that that is what's happened in most of the Harmonsworth village or the residents list. They all appear to be properties which are of that size. So they are not controlled by the planning committee and the planning officers, and they don't require permission. So we cannot apply the council's policies to those properties unless there's an Article 4 direction restricting those permitted development rights, which there is in parts of Hillingdon, but not in this particular part. Those that do need permission, such as this one, because they have more residents than 6, there are policies which restrict the numbers that you would have within a road, not within a village or an area, but within a road. So it's 10% is normally the restriction within a kilometre of the site, 500 metres each way of the road. So in this particular case, it's difficult to assess because we don't particularly have a lengthy piece of road to assess. So on that basis, we're saying that it is acceptable and in compliance with the council's policies.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard the advice we've been given there. As a planning committee, we need to follow the policies that exist in the moment. There is a legitimate issue that you may wish to take up with your own ward councillors about whether or not that policy needs to be amended. But until such time as that is amended, we have to comply with the policy as set down. And the advice we've been given here is that it is outside of the Article 4 area. Therefore, although you may wish it to apply, we cannot apply that criteria. And the only other policy we have concerns the number of HMOs in a road. And there is a obvious difficulty in that this isn't on a single road where you can measure distance either side. And so we have some difficulty in applying that particular policy. So that matter is something that has been raised and has been answered, but may be something you wish to take up separately with your ward councillors. Okay. Colleagues, can I now throw this open to discussion? We do need to look at the parking issue and bottom that one out. That still hasn't been properly resolved. But this is now the time for you guys to come in, please. Councillor Karcher.
Thank you, Chair. It's been said a number of times since we've been discussing this matter. This is on temporary basis, right? It's a period of 3 years. And then can you please explain it to me? How is this managed? That how are we going to make sure it is only for 3 years, or things are going to change afterwards?
Thank you. Mr. Krushak.
So in terms of management of the building itself, there are 2 things to bear in mind. So one is condition 7, set out on page 13, asks for a management plan. So whilst the use is ongoing, we suggest there needs to be a management plan as to how the building is going to be used. Now, what the applicant has set out to you and the petitioner in favour of the application has set out is that this is a meanwhile use, a temporary use while they seek planning consent for a wider redevelopment. However, if that does not happen and they get to the end of the 3-year period that they're applying for under this application, then they would need to gain a new consent, or they could face possible enforcement action from the council if there was harm from that use continuing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Other questions, colleagues? Let me then raise the issue of parking. It has been commented that parking is problematic. However, it does appear to me that there is parking provided that is compliant with our policy. Can you cast further light regarding the access and whether or not there is a belief that there is likely or possibly a parking problem arising from this? In particular, if you could cover it, I understand there has previously been problems with parking and whether that has been related to an HMO or other matter.
If I take perhaps the wider question of parking as a problem in this area, there are ongoing enforcement investigations that the council has because of car parking, ad hoc car parking, which has taken place adjacent to this site, particularly adjacent to the Great Barn and the other vacant buildings. And we've been successful in significantly reducing the number of cars that are in that area over the last month or so. A recent inspection was taken only today, and the number of cars has come down. However, this part of the borough is an area where we do have problems with unauthorised car parking, and it is something we're very hot on, and we are trying to take steps where possible. If I refer to my colleague in relation to the specific question of the number of car parking spaces for this application and whether they're sufficient.
Sure. So in terms of the council's car parking standard, it requires one space for 2 bedrooms. So in this case, the council's car parking standards require 5 car parking spaces only. The applicant is providing 7 in this case, and there's other areas available within there to park too. So from a parking perspective, it meets our standards.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, colleagues? Councillor Morse.
Do we have clarity? We have right of access, right of way into this car parking area, because I understand there has been some difficulties, although I'm not clear what they are. Can we have confirmation with that people living there will have?
In planning, we deal with the balance of probability. So this, as you've heard this evening, this is a use which has been going on for a year. We've got no evidence before us that there isn't a right of way, and so whilst I can't say to you that I have legal documentation which demonstrates there is, I've got no reason on the balance of probability to assume that there are any difficulties in gaining access, because the use is ongoing and has been for some time.
Other questions, colleagues? Councillor Sid and then Councillor Yarrow, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I believe that we're reaching a stage where we're just about running around in circles, covering stuff that we've already covered. So, very reluctantly, I would propose that we go with officer's recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Yarrow?
Well, I will second that, but I'd like to just make a statement to the petitioners, and it's similar to what you said, Chairman, and it is that we have to operate under fairly strict rules and regulations as to what we can accept and what we can reject. And this has been operating for the last year, and there don't appear to have been any major problems, and it's only to operate for another 3 years, and then we hope that another development will take place. Now, that's no consolation to those people who have spent a lot of time preparing their petition with some very interesting information in, and all I would like to say to them is you need to contact your ward councillors about HMOs, and if necessary petition the cabinet member responsible for being able to generate another section, is it section 4 or section Article 4, to implement an Article 4 for your area or part of your area. That is not an impossible task, I don't believe, and I think you should do it. I think this information is crying out for it with all that you said. So, although I'm putting it forward that I'm seconding to accept what you don't want us to accept. You have got hope, and please go down the petition route, contact the ward councillors, and try and get a change to how we deal with HMOs in your area.
Thank you very much. I'm hugely embarrassed Your mention of ward councillors reminds me that we have a ward councillor present who I didn't invite to speak, for which I apologise greatly. And what I'm now going to do is put all of that proposing and seconding aside and invite you to come forward and present other information if you wish to do so, Councillor Nelson. I do apologise to you. I overlooked that fact. However, it would be wrong of me to now ignore it. I do believe you have the right to be heard, and we will consider your information and discuss that as well. So if you'd like to come forward, with my apology.
Thank you, Chairman, for giving me this opportunity. I've been a ward councillor in Heathrow Villages for the past 6 years now. And the issue which has mentioned previously where they were going to have a residential home there, we had this issue that was brought up in regards to using of the area. Subsequently from then we have issues with parking and the Great Barn. Now, my main concern as a resident is about the HMO, and I'm glad to hear that we can bring forward thing to the cabinet member about it, because I wasn't aware of that. Because if we were, then it's something that we would have been acting upon beforehand. The other concern is about the parking issue which has been raised. That particular, the whole area within the barn itself, is an issue we have with car parking, airport car parking, unauthorized parking, the area that was pointed out by Councillor Morse about the access, which is one access into the premises. It's the only access into the premises. The previous owner, and I'm presuming that the person who owns the building is still the owner, the previous owner before, or has it changed hands?
I'm sorry, I don't have that information.
Okay, because it has changed. It changed hands because what happened is that they previously got double yellow lines, unofficial double yellow lines between the church, the pub, and the Scouts hut, so that no residents can park there without permission. And whoever is in charge has given out notice that they have to notify them when they're parking. And I'm fully aware that representation was made by the church to find out who owned the land, as well through the council who owned the land, and up to this present time nobody seems to own the land. It's a no man's land as far as we made aware. So just to bear in mind that the continuous parking, illegal parking that is happening there in the barn, because the access to that parking area is the person who owns the premises, as well as the people of the conservation area. Another issue I want to bring to your attention, it was noted by the presenter for the petition, is that they had discussions with members of the conservation group. We got the chair and the vice chair sitting here. They weren't consulted about it. So I don't know where that consultation took place, because if it has, it would have been brought to our attention, because we work very, very closely with our residents in Hammondsworth. So I'd like you to bear that in mind. And I listened to what is being said, and I know that the rules cannot be changed, but it would have been good if we had known that beforehand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I'd just like to come back on a couple of things. I'll start with the last bit, and that is any other development and proposals are outside of this committee's purview at this moment. We can only consider the application before us, and we are bound by that. With regards to the parking, I do understand that there are problems in that area, as in many other parts of the borough. That wider public parking pressure, whilst we can recognise it in its widest term, if the premise and the proposal before us satisfies our policy with regards to parking, it becomes not unsustainable of this committee to refuse it on the grounds of inadequate parking if it complies with our policy. So we have provided, we've said the parking policy for an HMO is one space for 2 bedrooms. This provides in excess of it. So it would be a perverse move of this committee to say that there is inadequate parking. What may need to change, if residents felt that that wasn't sufficient, is for the policy to be changed, and then we have a process in which the policy is changed, and then the committee can consider any new policy. But we are very much bound to follow our policies. It's a policy-led planning process. So it's noted. I understand that all of our colleagues will have some great identity with that as a problem. But I do believe that with regards to parking on this application, the question has been answered. Okay, thank you. Yeah, Mr. Kruczek, would you come in?
Thanks, Chairman. There was a point made about a failure to consult with the local conservation panel. If I just draw your attention on page 20, we have received comments on this application from the Harmondsworth Conservation Advisory Panel. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think the issue may have been confused between this application and the wider application about further development. Suffice it to say that there has been adequate consultation on this particular application. So thank you for that. Okay, we've now heard all of the petitions. Councillor Stead, do you wish to come back in again? And I apologise for my mismanagement of this section.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, I can only sympathise with the people, and especially the Article 4, because I have been involved in that in other areas. And nothing that was said hasn't really changed my mind. I still feel that we've got to work within the guidelines that are set out for us, and I say we go with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Yarrow.
No, I haven't heard anything that's going to make me change my mind. I just hope the residents will heed what's been said and take some action on it. And I propose that I second the motion to accept the officer's recommendations.
Colleagues, it's been formally proposed and seconded. Can I have a show of hands, please? Go with the officer's recommendations. Thank you. Against? 5-3.
On the basis of for traffic generation.
Thank you.
Part 3.
Understood. Thank you. No, that's fine. It's absolutely fine and proper. No, I have no issue with that.
I'm not happy, but I'm not going to bring it up. That's still on there.
Right. We've just had a suggestion of how we might solve the feedback of the mics, so we're going to shuffle some down and see if that improves the situation. Bear with us 2 seconds. Well done, Luke. Thank you very much. We move now, please, to item 7, 20 Vine Lane. Mr. Raleigh.
Thank you, Chairman. This application relates to 20 Vine Lane, which comprises a larger detached dwelling situated at the junction of Vine Lane and Chetwynd Drive. Excuse me. The proposal is for the change of use of the property to an 8-bed house in multiple occupation. The application is subject to 4 letters and a petition, and the details of the consultation replies are set out on pages 38 and 39 of the agenda. Main issues for us to consider are the principle of the use, the quality of accommodation and the impact on adjoining residents. In terms of the principle of the use, the site falls outside the area to which the Council has applied an Article 4 direction, which restricts permitted development rights to convert properties to multiple occupation for no more than 6 occupants. The property has been licensed as an HMO for no more than 6 occupants since January 2016. Furthermore, the Council's supplementary planning guidance on houses in multiple occupation states that converting detached houses is often the most suitable form, as large plots enable more off-street parking and garden space, in addition to reduced impact on adjoining occupiers in respect of noise levels. Given that the property is already lawfully in use as an HMO, it would be difficult to resist in principle an increase in the number of occupiers by 2. In terms of the quality of the accommodation provided, the Council's supplementary guidance that sets out recommended guidelines relating to the internal layouts of such developments and the sizes of rooms to be provided. In this case, all of the rooms exceed the council's minimum standards, and the property has adequate facilities, including a large communal swimming pool, gym area, as well as a breakfast dining area. The SPG also recommends that a minimum of 15 square metres of usable amenity space is provided per habitable room. Thus, 120 square metres of amenity space should be provided. With a usable garden area of some 450 square metres, the development complies with the standard. Thus, it is considered that the development provides an acceptable living environment for its occupants. In terms of the impact on adjoining occupiers, no external alterations to the building are proposed, and the proposal is to increase the number of occupants from 6 to 8. This level of intensification of the use, whilst it may result in a small increase in activity to and from the site and in the use of the rear amenity area, is not such that a refusal could be justified on this ground. In conclusion, the principle of the use is considered in compliance with policy. The proposal is considered to provide an acceptable living environment for its occupants, and the impact on the adjoining occupiers is not such that a refusal could be justified. Accordingly, approval is recommended. If I can just go through the plans again. Used to the old clicker. That's the site, junction of Chetwynd Drive and Vine Lane. And these are the floor plans and the photographs of the site and internal photographs. And the amenity area. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Before we move on, if we just go back to the one that's showing the hard standing at the front, which seems very, very large and devoid of any greenery, can you comment on whether or not we may take any action against that?
Thank you, Chairman. I did check the age of that hard standing. It has been there since at least 2008, which is as far back as our photographs go, and given that enforcement action, or you cannot take enforcement action after 4 years, that's been in existence for longer than that, so it's free from enforcement.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. We have petition, Mrs. Siegel petition. If you'd like to come forward. I just remind you, it's a 5-minute speaking rights, and once, thank you. Once you turn the microphone on, we will start the lights to give you 4 minutes on green, 1 on amber, and then we draw you to a close. Okay. Thank you very much.
My name is Liz Siegel. I'm chairman of Vine Lane Residents Association. I'm speaking on behalf of the 47 residents who've signed the petition objecting to the application to convert 20 Vine Lane to an 8-bed house of multi-occupancy. Most of these signatories are near neighbours of 20 Vine Lane. Unfortunately, I only received 4 days' notice of this hearing, so I was unable to contact all the signatories. Vine Lane is very much a family-occupied area, and multi-occupancy doesn't fit with its character. A specific problem is the increased vehicular traffic caused by extra cars coming and going at peak times. What this doesn't show is there's another gate nearer the crossroads. 20 Vine Lane is on a very busy crossroad where there are frequent accidents and damage to fences. The blue lights on the house, which also aren't shown, do not fit into the character of the road. They're uplights under the windows. The application did not mention the 2 protected trees in the front garden, and I assume those would be saved. One reason for the concern of the neighbours is the past history of the house, which had been neglected for many years and was a centre for drug dealing, money laundering, and it attracted antisocial behaviour and a lot of police activity. I have actually had a helpful discussion by email with Mr. Malkit Purawal, who is the owner of the house and lives next door at number 18. Anyway, thank you for your consideration of our petition.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, any questions at all, clarification? Thank you. If I may invite you to return to your seat. If you'd like to return to your seat, thank you very much, Mr. Siegel. Is Mr. Purawal or the agent, Mr. Dodd, here and wish to speak? No, thank you. Councillor Graham. Please, I know that you wish to speak. And I'm learning my lesson. 3 minutes when you turn the microphone on. Thank you very much.
Yes, good evening, Chairman and Committee. I'm Councillor Ray Graham, Uxbridge North Ward. I'm afraid that some of what I will say will probably be repetitive following on from the petitioner, but it's fully understandable that 47 petitioners and the various residents living nearby should be against this application. And I wish to make clear that the house, as Mr. Siegel said, has a very checkered history, and some comments confirm this. The property is situated on the corner of the very busy Vine Lane with Chetwynd Drive, which is a four-way crossover junction, and vehicles leaving and entering number 20 can and do present problems on the busy corner, especially during rush hour periods. However, as we know, it's a fact that under permitted development, an HMO of 6 residents would be allowed, and that notwithstanding, I would prefer that the figure of 6 be more realistic than the 8 residents that are proposed. If the committee is minded to support the officer's recommendation for approval of the application, then I would wish to see very strict and stringent conditions imposed, some of which are, as per the report, as follows. Strictly not more than 8 persons to occupy the premises at any one time. I say this given that each of the bedrooms are double bedrooms, double rooms in other words. The kitchen facilities to be upgraded as per the housing surveyor's recommendation, which is most important in a situation like this. There does seem to be a limit to the amount of available social space within the building. It's all very well saying there's a swimming pool and everything else, but that's not where they will be, for the most part, spending their leisure time. And also, I wish to see detailed management and maintenance of the upkeep of the house and the gardens, etc. I would add also that a close watch will be maintained by me and others on any antisocial behaviour, often a regretful feature with HMOs. If this happens, there are means to combat the problem, and I emphasise this for the benefit of neighbours. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Any questions from colleagues? Thank you very much. I invite you to return to your seat. I picked up a couple of issues that I would like some comment on. First and foremost, it is the traffic one. The intensification of the use of the drive now for potentially up to 8 cars at a crossing, whether or not there is additional risk being presented there to other road users. And I'd also like to ask just about the blue lights that were commented on. You know, a resident feels that they're out of keeping with the street. Is that a matter that is controllable by us? So those are the 2 issues.
Okay, so in terms of car parking, as I said previously, the council standards are 1 space per 2 bedrooms, and in this case, for 8 beds, it will be 4 spaces. What we're considering here is an addition of 2 beds, and for that, we are looking at an increase of 1 car parking space as per the standards. So from my perspective, we can't really justify any issues resulting, any sort of significant issues from an addition of one additional parking space or 2 beds per se. Because the test set out in the National Planning Policy Framework is if the transport is going to have severe impacts, it is only then that it becomes unacceptable from a planning perspective.
Thank you. I think the addition of one car makes it difficult to be a severe impact, notwithstanding the presence of a road junction very close by. A blue light on the outside of a property. Sorry.
Again, this is an issue of permitted development. Lighting is not controlled under the GPDO, so you could put all sorts of spotlights and things outside your property without control, and it's difficult to, if it's causing a nuisance that's possibly covered under other legislation, but if it's lights just to light the property, then they're not covered and do not require permission.
Thank you. What we've been advised of there is that the government has determined that residents are able to take certain actions, including putting up lights, of which are outside of our control, and the only way we can intervene is if the lights that are installed cause nuisance. Where it's a matter of colour, that's more of a matter of taste. And the government has felt minded to delegate that to residents rather than to the planning committee. Therefore, we can't intervene on that particular matter. Colleagues, I open this one up now to discussion. Councillor East and Councillor Carter.
Thank you very much, Chair. Should this go through, I'd like to see what are the recommendations about the new kitchen layout, that it should be maintained, because this is something that's been recommended to make sure that, living conditions for future occupiers. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Crochet, item condition 4, does that sufficiently cover the maintenance?
Yeah, I mean, the condition 4 requires a revised kitchen layout, and then once that layout is approved, it requires it to be implemented and then maintained in that form. So that condition is sufficiently robust for us to say that they can't change it back to an unacceptable layout afterwards. There were comments about conditions relating to the number of people. Again, there isn't a condition restricting the number of persons that occupy the property as well, and there is a requirement for a management plan which hopefully will involve maintenance of the garden areas and the property itself. So hopefully those are all robust conditions which will assist in limiting the impact on the residents. If I can comment on condition 7, it's possibly a bit too restrictive in that it probably precludes hedge maintenance, if you like. So if I can get delegated authority to slightly reword that so that maintenance of hedges can be done without resorting to the local planning authority. We obviously want to retain the trees, and we want to make sure that they are maintained properly, but we also want to make sure that hedges are allowed to be cut back in a normal manner. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor? Thank you. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Although partially my question is already answered, I was quite concerned about the trees and the greenery wedges around the place. Is it going to be saved, or are we going to lose any? Because by looking at it, there is not much there. So if we lose any, if there's going to be nothing left. So I just wanted to make sure the condition is put in for that. And thank you. That's it, really.
Thank you. I very much agree with you that the concern of mine was the front, but unfortunately that is outside of our control at the moment. However, the condition here about trees to be retained on condition 7, at the moment, to me, is far too onerous, because technically or arguably, each time somebody pruned a shrub, they'd have to write to the council to get permission, and we'd have to say, yes, you can prune that shrub, and yes, you could trim that hedge. Now, each of that is an ongoing garden, it's maintenance operation. What I would like to see, and what I would ask colleagues to delegate to the head of planning, is a reworded condition that says the lopping and felling of trees obviously requires the council permission. The removal of hedges requires council permission, but just the trimming of hedges and the trimming of shrubs is not a matter that should be controlled by us. It would be far too onerous, I believe. Okay. Councillor Yarrow.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, this is in my ward, and I'm interested in not more than 8 persons shall occupy the premises at any time. Depends how you define the word occupy, if that means the person who's paying the rent or in the premises. We have problems nearby from houses of multiple occupation that are run by Brunel University, and they have been given lots of problems where there'll be 150 people in the house when they throw a party. Now, what do we mean by 8 persons shall occupy the premises? Does it just mean 8? If they all brought a girlfriend home, would it be 16? If they had a party, would it be 50? I don't know. I think it's something we need to establish, if it's at all possible. And also, is this an upmarket HMO? I didn't know whether there were such things, but there's HMOs for students, and this looks like it's an HMO for a slightly higher level. I don't know what rents we're charging, but that might help pacify some of the worries. At the moment, I'm sure people think it's going to be full of students, and it's going to cause the same problems that it caused a year ago at party time.
Okay, that is a very good question, because I would certainly need to be taking advice from either our planning services manager or our legal advisors around how we define occupant.
So my suggestion would be that the occupant is somebody who has a right to reside, so they would have a tenancy agreement or some sort of formal agreement to reside in that property. We cannot control if a party is held or if somebody brings somebody home. I think what would happen, however, is if that relationship lasted a very long time and the reasonable person could assume that that other person was residing at the premises, then at that point they would be in breach of the condition that's set out before you.
Okay, so would it be appropriate here to remove the word occupant and put residing at the premise? Does that make it clearer?
Yeah, I think so. That would probably be a better idea to probably put in residing as opposed to occupation.
Okay. So we're talking about amending that condition to make it more transparent, that we're talking about people residing at the premise at any one time rather than occupying. So that was very helpful.
Have we got any indication on what rates are being charged? I mean, it's an HMO. I mean, but it's a rather upmarket HMO.
Sorry, Chairman. My suggestion to the committee is to give that a very limited weight. You're looking at the ability for this building to be used for the level of intensity that's been put forward before you. I would have concerns if you said that some users were acceptable and other users were not. So I would steer you, if I may, to look at whether the level of occupation which is being suggested is acceptable or not, to whether it's an upmarket HMO or other.
Thank you. Further issues, colleagues? Of course you may, Councillor Yarrow.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, well, that's pointed me in a particular direction when it comes to whether I support this application or not. I think it could be troublesome, and on the other hand, it might not be. And all I would say to the petitioner, if they heard what I said about the other HMO, and that if we can invoke Article 4, which we can't at this moment in time, I'm the ward councillor, the other ward councillor is here, maybe we should be looking at that particular area and starting to find out just how many HMOs there are, and so that we can put residents' minds at rest and say, well, maybe we should be looking at some kind of restrictions being applied in that particular area. To increase this by 2, I will not be supporting it.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, any other issues? Councillor Morse.
I've noticed a couple of occasions we've had sort of semi-detached being applied for 6 users in an HMO. I mean, reluctantly, looking at the size of this building, I think it could take 8 residents, I think, given the size of it. But I do think we need to develop some policies regarding over-intensification of use of buildings, so that we have some options on this, because we've rejected one on this before. I'm not quite clear what policies we've rejected it, but I think we actually need some policies on HMO.
Okay, there is a separate issue to be taken outside of this, which is the council's approach and stance towards HMOs most generally. At this moment in time, though, we have an application before us, a particular residence that is used for 6 people at the moment, that is large enough to take 8. What we would need to be clear on, if we were to say no to this, are the planning grounds for saying no. And that is different from any perception we may have of what might happen. HMOs can be problematic. They can also be very, very well managed and very useful. A lot of people do use them, and they provide a useful part of a mixed housing economy. And I wouldn't wish to see no HMOs in this borough. The issue before us is whether or not this premise, this application, is suitable for increasing from 6 to 8. And we need to be very clear on the grounds for saying no, if the committee was minded to say no, but I've only heard that view from one member so far. So I'm looking for other contributions here, please. Councillor Contra.
Thank you, Chair. This case is just, we like we said earlier on, we are going once again in circles, and it is revolving round HMOs, parking issues, right? So therefore, in order to, if we don't support that, whether we support that, once again, I will ask the officers, what sort of legs do we have stand on? Do we have, is this good enough? If we say no, where does that lead us?
I'll pass that over to our planning services manager and potentially our legal advisor.
So if I answer this in the round, because there's been discussion twice now on 2 applications about Article 4 directives. What the Article 4 directive does is take away permitted development rights. So as we've seen here, this property is already in use as a 6-person HMO because it does not require planning consent to do that. The benefit in the council's already taken steps in one part of the borough to impose an Article 4 to take away that ability, to allow us to exert some form of control. The benefit we have with this application before you is because a more intensive use is applied for, going from 6 to 8, that means it does come within the planning remit, and therefore you have before you a suite of very restrictive conditions, including one for a site management plan which is ongoing, so that this arguably would be a better managed and better HMO than might be the situation if it remained at 6 and was outside of our planning controls. Although it would still be subject to separate licensing under the Housing Act. So, in answer to your question, the difficulty would be in terms of refusing this application, you would not only have to demonstrate how the increase from 6 to 8 was so detrimental that it led to your conclusion that it was something which would have to be refused, but that you would also have to demonstrate why the restrictive conditions that we as officers have put forward would not be sufficient to overcome those concerns that you have. And if as a committee you are unable to do that, then that would weaken your case to any subsequent appeal. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Very helpful. Councillor Chandar.
Thank you, Chair. I think looking at the property we see here, it's not one of your typical HMOs where it's small and cramped. They're trying to push in as much as they can. I understand the petition is right that it will cause issues with parking, current layout as it is. But I think in terms of what's been presented and with all the other conditions, I think we should move with the officer recommendations with the changes that you've suggested. So,
thank you very much. Councillor Contra.
Thank you. Yeah, with a lot of concerns and making sure the conditions are put in place, I will second that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we're formally proposing and seconding to go with the officer's recommendations as amended by, we're talking around the occupancy condition being changed to residence, and an amendment to delegated authority to the head of planning to word condition 7 to make it less restrictive with regards to garden maintenance, but ensuring the retention of hedges and trees. Okay, that's for the clarity. That's what we're proposing. From a show of hands, please, on that, support that one. That is 7, and those against, those abstaining. 1 abstention. Thank you. Okay, I hope we've made ourselves clear about what's happened there. Okay, thank you. Right, if we turn to agenda item 8, please, 49 Bourne Avenue.
Thank you, Chairman. 49 Bourne Avenue, this is an application, it's a detached bungalow. This is an application for a side extension. There has been considerable history on this and previous refusals. The reasons relate to the impact on the adjoining occupiers and the design of the extension. So if I can just go straight to the plans. This is the existing situation. And the issues that concern us relate really to the way that the roof relates here to the existing roof and to the back, and more importantly, I guess, is the impact on the adjoining occupier. And again, if I go to the photographs, this is the only window in the adjoining property to a habitable room, and the extension would be within a metre of that window. So we're saying that it's unacceptable for the impact on the adjoining occupiers. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Question, Councillor Carter.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I have no questions, and I was very happy to go with the officer's recommendation looking at that.
Councillor Stead.
I second that, Chairman.
That's everybody. Thank you very much. That one is refused. Agenda item 9, 28 Keats Way.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, if I can refer you to the history on this property. This is an application for a 2-storey, 2-bed attached dwelling, and there's considerable history going back a number of years for detached or for attached dwellings to this property. And if I refer you to page 60 and section 7.09, that sets out the issues in relation to the amenity space and the inspector's considerations, which is the hub or the nub of the issue in this particular case. And in both the 2010 and 2000 appeal decisions, the inspector found that the amenity space was unacceptable. The situation has been made worse since those decisions because, as you can see, a couple of outbuildings have been erected in the garden area. Plus, there's also a canopy which is not on this drawing to the back. So if I go to the photographs, you'll see both of those. There's the canopy and the outbuildings, and this is in effect the extent of the amenity space that's left, the depth of it, and we're saying that that's well below our standards and unacceptable for a 2-bed property. Thank you, Chairman.
Just a quick question of clarification for me. Our policy with regards to amenity space, does that preclude covered amenity space that's otherwise open? This is potentially amenity space that's out of the rain. Is that counted or not counted by way of policy?
We have counted that as part of the overall provision, but it's still well below.
Fine, thank you. That satisfies me. quite a clear issue here. It's outside of our policies with regard to amenity space. Councillor Stead.
I suggest we go the officer's recommendations. Chairman, please.
Thank you very much. Councillor East.
I'd like to second that.
Thank you very much. Show of hands, please. That is everybody. Thank you. All right. Moving swiftly on. We're now on to the next item, 10. 21 Parkfield Avenue, Hillingdon.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a two-storey mid-terrace property situated on the western side of Parkfield Avenue. This application relates to an outbuilding and members are well aware of the issues in relation to that. Again, if I can go straight to the plans, there are existing buildings on the site in a fairly dilapidated condition, a garage and a sort of supplementary garage stroke storeroom, and the proposal is to replace those with a building with a building which provides a games room. There is a shower room proposed as part of the proposal. The overall floor, the footprint is approximately 43 square metres, and it replaces a footprint of approximately 35 square metres. So we're talking about an increase of 7 to 8 square metres overall. The issue, as we've always had with these, is the possible use of them. It does have an access to the rear, and the size is over and above the size of what would be a normal studio flat. So we're saying that they haven't really demonstrated why they need a building of this size to provide a games room and storage space. So for that reason we're recommending refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, Chairman.
There is a fairly lengthy supplementary. We have received comments from the applicants who set out the reasons why they're proposing this building and why they need the space that they're proposing. Whilst we've taken that into account, and there is a revised plan that's been submitted, which is the plan that you see in front of you. And whilst we take those comments into account, we still feel that we need further justification, and we don't have that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I'd just like some clarification here. Firstly, in terms of footprint, is this an extraordinary size with regards to these sorts of premises, or is there precedent for buildings of this size having been given permission? That's issue one. And issue two is the evidence that the applicant has put before us of how this room is going to be used and is laid out. Why does that not satisfy officers that this is a need ancillary to the use as a residence?
If I can just cover the size issue, as members will know, we've had numerous applications, certificates of lawful development for outbuildings, and they do vary in size from between 20 and over 50 square metres. We've refused quite a number of buildings which have been over what we feel is oversized, and they would be in the region of 40, 50 plus square metres, so this falls within that. I have to say, as a word of caution, that we have lost a number of appeals on those sizes, although we haven't approved a great deal of buildings of that size or of this size. We have lost a number of appeals of buildings of this size and over.
Thank you. Let's ask the first. Second part.
Thank you, Chairman. So I think I've commented previously on similar applications that what we're looking at is the aggregation of all the different issues. So what is being provided And how does that allow for something which could be used independently from the main house? You'll see from the reason for refusal, what we're concerned about is that all the factors here would allow for this to be used as a separate dwelling. So we have the provision of facilities within the unit. We have a shower room, which is arguably one step beyond a toilet facility. We don't have any internal subdivision beyond that shower room within the structure which is proposed, but we have a large space. And what the applicant has sought to do is to demonstrate why that large space is necessary. So on the amended plan, which is on the screen behind you, they set out how that would be used. But there are other factors that we take into account. So not only has it got facilities which allow for its use independent from the main house, not only is it large, but it backs onto a rear access, and whilst no access is shown from the structure onto that rear way, it does mean that the structure could be accessed independently from the main house. You might not need to go through the main house to access this structure in the future. Taking all these factors into consideration, we need to come to a view whether a restrictive condition would be sufficient to overcome our concerns, or whether on the balance of everything before us we feel the application is unacceptable as it stands. Notwithstanding the 7 points that have been put forward to you in the addendum sheet, on balance, our recommendation as officers is that the application be refused. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before I bring in Councillor Yarrow and then Councillor Chamdell, could you just advise, if we were to go with this and there were to be an appeal, there is a reasonable expectation of success, is an inference that I've drawn from Mr Harani's comments. Do we then weaken our position by not being able to put on sufficient conditions should a planning appeal inspector overturn our decision, and thereby weaken our opportunity to manage this from being used in an alternative way?
If the structure were to come into being and at a later date was converted into a separate dwelling, that would be a change of use which requires planning consent. So we would always have the opportunity to take enforcement action to address any harm that arose from that. The benefit, however, of allowing these structures with a restrictive condition is that there is a foreshortened process for taking enforcement action in the future. So whereas if the structure here became a dwelling, we'd be serving enforcement notice. If we were to grant this application with restrictive conditions to seek to prevent its conversion in the future, we'd be going down a breach of condition notice against which there's no right of appeal. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, useful consideration there, colleagues. Councillor Yarrow, then Councillor Chamdell. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just take us to page 70, where the house has miraculously changed its address to 86 Hitherbroom Road.
That needs to be corrected.
On 2 occasions. Can you see it? First paragraph, second line from the bottom. And the third paragraph, 86 Hitherbroom Road.
I think what this is they're quotes from an appeal decision relating to that property. So they're not considerations in relation to this property. What this is setting out is considerations from an appeal decision, and they're direct quotes from that appeal decision.
Thank you. I think I understand. And what may assist us in the future is if when we're putting in quotes, we put it in italics. It makes it just so much easier that we're referring to a quote here rather than a comment or another issue, if that's possible. Okay, I'm just being told.
We can try and differentiate it in some way.
Thank you. Or some way. Thank you. Councillor Chamdell.
Thank you, Chair. When we first looked at this application, it just sort of rings home access at the back, large room. Have you got pictures to show the actual building, please?
The building is not there at the moment, but we've got pictures, obviously, of
the garages.
Yeah. So that's the joining, and that's the existing fairly ramshackle buildings on the site. So these are the the existing buildings, and then that's the access road to the rear and the buildings that surround it. So that's the actual garage, the whitish grey one, and then the adjoining ones are there.
In terms of, could you just clarify once again the floor area in terms of how, with this building in the garden, how much would it sort of reduce the garden by?
The actual garden space is sufficient so that it's over 60 square metres, so it would still comply with the requirement for a 3-bedroom dwelling, which is what the property is. So it's the actual garden space that's left, even if you put this building in, is still over 60 square metres.
Because the way I'm leaning towards is this could be, and actually somebody does want a gym there and a playroom or games room. The shower is a concern, because although he's got a gym there, I would always, if just a toilet there, I would sort of lean the other way. The shower, just, is there any conditions we can put that you can't have a shower in there, basically?
Please, you need to come in there.
So you can only impose a condition which makes an application which you think is unacceptable acceptable. So if you felt that within a set amount of time you wanted an amended plan, well, let me start that again. What you could do is you could find that the application would be acceptable subject to amended plans being received, only indicating a toilet and no shower facilities. You can either do that by delegating authority to the head of planning to secure that before issuing any consent, or if you wanted to make a decision here and now, you could do that by imposing a condition such that within a set specified time period, an amended plan must be submitted to the council demonstrating what it is you want. You've got two options to achieve the same end.
Has that sufficiently answered the question?
I think we go down a route, it's not one of those that completely covers the garden from top to back, but at the same time you've got that back access which tends to suggest something might be not quite right, but at the same time, do we do that for every application? Then this seems plausible that they just might want it as a games room, and if we put the right conditions in, if it does go the other way, then we have a right of actually having some enforcement.
If I may just share my thoughts with you, it must become. I'm not clear on how we can determine whether or not a games room and playroom is 25 square metres, 27 square metres, 30 metres. There comes a limit by which we know that it's unreasonable. But at what point do we apply our judgment over an applicant's? That for me is an issue. Our concern here is the potential misuse of this property. And if we refuse it and it goes to appeal and it's allowed, our enforcement angle, for me, is made more difficult, more challenging, slower. By approving and conditioning, we can close the door firmly on that potential, what we consider to be misuse, without coming to any other judgment of whether this is a slightly over large playroom or a slightly over large whatever. So my view is that we need to be thinking down the road about, if this is used properly as a games room, ancillary to the use of the house, and the family enjoy it as the use intended, then great. If it's misused, we want to be able to take action. And for me, we want to be able to take action as speedily as possible and as effectively as possible. And what I would hate to see is our decision-making hinder that possible enforcement action. However, that doesn't mean to say we approve things that are wholly inappropriate. And it is for the committee to decide whether or not this, on balance, is appropriate or is not appropriate. Councillor Contra.
Thank you, Chair. I do believe, this is my view, things like that do come back and haunt us. And we do have very large, as you all know more than I ever will do, problem with beds and sheds. Right, fine, they want a game room, I can understand that. Well, why does it have to? Why do they need the other facilities? Fine size if it can be within the space they have. They can have a bigger room. Why do they have to have a shower? Why do they have to have toilet? Why do they have to have that empty space? Which right, it's not for us to make a judgment, but then that space is going to be, without being horrible, a tiny little kitchen, and before you know, beds and sheds again. So that's my view, and that's my concern. So from my point of view, I understand what you said, that if we don't approve it, we might, might go for appeal, and there might be a longer procedure to enforce it. But I do feel that back extension is going to be too large for the reason they're asking.
Thank you very much. Clearly brought that. Councillor Morse?
So I'm not trying. You could extend your logic a step further. This person uses it as a games room. He then leaves and goes somewhere else and sells the house, and somebody arrives and he's got this and wants to use it for a beds and chairs occupation. And I think you've got to be. That's why we're in whatever we do, we're damned. So I actually think we should follow officer's recommendation.
I have no difficulty with that whatsoever. Councillor Stead?
I would second that proposal, Chairman. Thank you.
It was formally proposed. Was it formally proposed?
No, I will formally propose it.
It is formally proposed by Councillor Morse and formally seconded by Councillor Stead that we go with the officer's recommendations and refuse. Okay, show of hands please on that one. That is everybody. Thank you. Agenda item 11, 132 Uxbridge Road.
Thank you, Chairman. This is one that's been to committee previously. There's very little change to it, so if I go again straight to the plans, the proposal is for the use of the front part of the building as a A4 use, this is the existing situation, and then the proposed, so the front part of the building is an A4 restaurant, and the rear part, which is extended to provide a covered area here as a Sisha lounge, which is a sui generis use, and we're saying that that's unacceptable. There are residential properties all around this site, including above these premises, and we're saying that the impact on those premises is unacceptable. Furthermore, we have objections from the Council's highway engineer regarding the transport impacts of the proposal as well. So for those two reasons, we're saying it's unacceptable.
Councillor Yarrow.
I move that we accept the officer's recommendations.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chandler.
I second that.
Thank you very much. Show of hands, please, everybody. That is everybody. Thank you very much. We're now moving into part 2. So we'll just break the link. Whilst that's being broken, I'm going to hand this over to Councillor Yarrow as I have reported each of these matters.